So now, sorry about that. Sorry. Today we're gonna do another history video, specifically Vietnam War, but not what happened during the Vietnam War, how the U.S. got interested in Vietnam in the first place. All right, because a lot of things happened. So let's get a little precision on what Vietnam was first. All right. Vietnam was, formerly an independent country, but in 1848, which is, one of the peaks of colonialism, well, France colonized Vietnam. I mean, Vietnam fought back, obviously, but because of their inferior technology and the old-fashioned fighting tactics, they failed. And well, they got colonized and joined with Laos and Cambodia, which made French Indochina. Because Indochina, well, Indo near Indonesia, China, it's right underneath China. And it stayed that way for about a little bit more than a century. All right. Sorry. Now, of course, obviously, you can't have an entire century of occupying something and expecting that nothing can happen. Now, obviously, the U.S. didn't really have interest in Vietnam because even they were as with France twice. All right, they were also both in NATO. They were both in obviously on the same terms, democracy. However, in 1890, Ho Chi Minh was born, and after a while, actually, he got his education in France because because he lived in French-occupied Vietnam, so it makes sense for him to go to France. So he went to France, got a formal education there. He learned from France, and then actually in 1919, actually, when he was 29 years old, he asked President Woodrow Wilson for help. All right, but obviously because he was number one, very young. Number two, no one knew him. Number three, he was not very important. He was just a random Vietnamese guy learning in France, and he asked for the U.S. president for help. So obviously, Woodrow didn't answer. Now, afterwards, there was a little bit of a war, right? It started in 1945 and lasted until 1954, which is the first Indochina War, which is, Vietnam was revolting against against the French control. So they found the Viet Minh, because, Vietnam, Minh, his last name, Ho Chi Minh, and they fought back against the French for about from 1945 to 1954, which is 9 years, right? 9 years spanning period. And well, obviously they won at specifically the Battle of Dien Bien Phu. All right, they conquered and attacked the French, and they lost. So France was kicked out of Southeast Asia because the loss of their only colony. However, Vietnam got split at the 17th parallel into North Vietnam, which was Ho Chi Minh's part communism, and South, which is the democratic French and U.S. backed democratic government. It wasn't the best government. It's very disliked here. Now, also that led to the creation of CEDAW. There's NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization. CEDAW, Southeast Asian Treaty Organization. All right, it consisted of a few democratic nations: Philippines, Indonesia, Thailand, Malaysia, France, other countries. However, NATO worked because there were countries near each other. They understood each other. They had similar interests, similar governments, similar ideals. But, well, Europe and Southeast Asia, obviously they're very different, all right? They don't go together. So it was like very weak bondage. And then actually dissolved in 1975, and after France left in 1977. It was like, I lost my colony, I'm out. So obviously everyone left. Like, France went home, everyone else went home too. Now let's go back to the the Vietnam stuff, right? So first, the U.S. didn't really have much interest in Vietnam until they found out Ho Chi Minh was a communist, and well, it was during the peak of the Cold War, right? The Cuban Missile Crisis just happened in 1963, so they started intervening in 1964, and then withdraw troops in 1975, which is where South Vietnamese government was destroyed and Vietnam was united again. Sent troops, and Eisenhower actually called the Vietnam a domino effect. All right, the domino effect was basically, if we let Vietnam fall into the hands of the communist Ho Chi Minh Party, then all of Southeast Asia will fall under communist hands as well. So partly true and partly false. False because Laos is a communist revolt failed. And most other Southeast Asian nations didn't really become communist. They just became wary of Vietnam for a moment. But Cambodia, well, that was the true part of Eisenhower's domino plan because they became under Pol Pot, very terrible dictator. All right, so bad in fact that Vietnam invaded Cambodia because Cambodia did multiple disruptions, murders, and stuff across the the southwestern coast. All right, they just kill people and stuff, a massacre. So they invaded, and obviously that also led to the third Indochina War, which is China versus Vietnam. And well, obviously they still lost. All right, so Vietnam won. So in the end, summarizing this, NATO survived. Seattle was dissolved in 1977. Vietnam gained its independence from France. The domino effect slightly became justified, and while China lost to Vietnam again. Yeah, sucking to China. So yeah, that's my 6-minute video talking about the Vietnam War. Very light stuff. All right, so yeah, goodbye. See you next time.